Yeah, so my name's Justin. I am the host of the Empathetic Atheist Show. I've had both Sharif and Jake on the show before. Abdul Rahman, have you been on before on one of the after parties?
Show, but we talk on a daily basis. So
Yeah. I didn't know you had all that hair going on, man.
Yeah.
I like it. I like it.
But I think I've only ever been in the comments admiring all these glorious beards that seem to appear on your show. Proper son of beards.
But yeah, I host the Empathetic Atheist Show where I have people on with different beliefs, different perspectives on spirituality or supernatural claims, anything like that, and figure out what they believe and why. I currently do not debate with Muslims just for the simple fact that I want to be honest enough. I don't debate with Muslims on Islam because I currently don't know enough to even argue against it. I'm reading the Quran. I'm sure every single person in this room has heard me recite multiple Quranic verses, so I'm learning how to speak Arabic. I'm learning how to read and write Arabic. I want to be able to understand it. And it can go either two ways. Either I'm going to recite the Shahada that I've already memorized. Well, I memorized it a few months ago. I wouldn't know if I'd be able to do it exactly right now, but I've memorized it just in case, or I will be able to find issues and be able to, at a later point, be able to refute some of the claims that are in the Quran. But as of right now, I just ask these guys questions, try and get their perspective on it, because I don't believe that it's conducive to tell somebody that they're just not looking at it right. You actually jump into what they believe, their worldview, and then see if it's consistent within their own belief system.
Justin, I was going to ask you a question, actually. So I was going to say, you've obviously came from a Christian background, and I think probably these discussions have been the first time you probably interacted with Muslims. What's your perception in terms of the similarities or differences that you've come across when you talk to Christians as opposed to talking to Muslims?
I don't know a lot of the similarities except that you both believe in a God. It's like one of the only similarities.
What about the different, in terms of the way both groups approach things like belief?
Okay. So when speaking to an atheist, Christians will say, I have this book right here. Read it, have faith. Jesus says so. Jesus is God. And if you don't believe that, you're going to burn in hell. And it becomes a circular argument to where God exists because the Bible says so. And the Bible's the inherent word of God, which proves the Bible, that proves God. And it just keeps going in a circle. And it's fear mongering and circular reasoning that comes from the Christian when speaking to me. And then when I speak to you guys on a daily basis, we go through philosophical arguments where you take your belief system. You guys haven't even brought up a single Quranic verse when speaking with me. Not yet. We're not to that point yet. We're simply just getting me to the point to where I'm understanding that it is possible that for there to be a necessary being, looking at the kalam, the contingency, the necessary being, everything like that, and then we move forward. And I think we're at the point to where you guys are like, okay, now we can look at the Quran and see what's inside of this book, to establish some type of dominancy over other possible God claims. So I would say there's a big difference between those right there.
Yeah, so we what you're saying is that as Muslims, we don't really come across as though we're presupposing the Quran and saying to people, right, you've got to believe it because the Quran says so. We try and demonstrate some evidences, arguments for the positions that we hold. And the first one is obviously the belief in a creator, as Muslims would say, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Mm-hmm. What is your thinking about some of the arguments that have been presented so far for the existence of what you mentioned, the necessary being? We don't need to debate it here.
No, that's fine. That's fine. To be completely honest with you, it was stepping completely outside, throwing away as many biases as I have, which I would agree that everybody has a bias of some sort. Trying to throw as many of those out the window and not focus on those. They're quite, with my frame of knowledge, they're quite convincing. Just to think that, well, if the universe is, for example, if the universe is eternal, then there's a infinite amount of causes and effects that preceded this moment right now. So how could we ever get to this moment right now if it didn't have a beginning? Like, that makes sense. That's convincing. It's logical. The one bias that I hold on to is, even though I think that's extremely logical and makes a lot of sense, I'm still stuck with this. Okay, so the premises of the logical syllogism need to be backed up by some type of empirical means. So I'm not calling myself an empiricist, but I still value empirical data to a point to where I'm not fully convinced that these are true until I have, and it's almost a little bit past skepticism at that point when we're speaking of just logical arguments.
Can I ask you a question, Justin? Do you like computer games?
I don't play too many games, especially not on the computer, but
you've played games before,
console games,
or anything like there's you have these online multiplayer games sometimes. Have you ever played anything like that? Or
yeah, I've played those before.
All right, so imagine there's this world, like World of Warcraft, right? It's a computer program, and the people that made it, or the person that made it, has created these little beings in there with conscious, like they are self-aware, they're intelligent, they can converse with each other. Have you muted yourself on purpose? Or? So they're self-aware and they can talk to each other. And then one of them, you talk to him, and you're communicating with him, but you choose him because he's showing particular characteristics, as making you favor him above all the others. And the reason you're favoring him above all the others is because if you tried talking to someone who didn't have these characteristics, it would go to their head, or they may express it in a problematic way. And so you pick a particular one, you talk to him, and you say, "Spread my message," and he does. And he's telling everyone, "Listen, there's this being. It's made this world that we live in. All these things, everything around us, it's all been made by this being, and it's communicating and it's giving guidance to me." To give to you lot, so that we can all get along much better and work well and do what it is that we should be doing. And they all say, we need empirical evidence. You need to get something that we can see in this world, that is in the computer game, that proves the existence of the thing that created it. Or another shorter example, it's like I show you a painting, and then you say that, no, I want to believe there's a painter. It seems very rational that this painter exists and he painted this painting, but I need you to show me evidence in the painting. You can't go beyond the painting. You've got to show me evidence of the painter in the painting. It can't go beyond that. Do you see an issue with this?
I see the issue. I see the exact issue that you're speaking of. And
okay. And do you see how that relates to you with this issue?
Exactly. Yeah, I totally understand. It makes complete sense the way you're explaining it.
Okay. So how would you then react?
I'm still trying to get rid of this bias.
Do you think, Justin, do you think it's more like almost we had Elmo on and he said he's got this spiritual feeling in his heart for the Holy Spirit?
The atheist fitra.
Do you think you've got a similar, like, I've just got this feeling in my heart that I need empirical evidence to see God?
No, I think it's just a standard that I've been set up with, and we don't have to go down this route because I know I talk about this way too often.
Determinism.
Subscribing to hard determinism, yeah. So
yeah.
I don't choose.
Sorry to add to that, because I think, like, because you're talking about cosmological arguments, right? Specifically the contingency argument. It is kind of empirical in the sense that what it does is it points to the to the observable, and it makes an inference to the unobservable. So in a sense, it is empirical. It isn't scientific, but it isn't empirical like in the sense that it does use the contingent world or the observable world around us as a basis for the inference that God exists.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can understand that. I can definitely understand that. So what I was basically getting at was that I can't choose what I'm convinced of, and I can't choose what convinces me. I have a certain standards of evidence that is set up to where I either accept a proposition or I deny the proposition. If there's a separate argument that can be made that can convince me that a different standards of evidence is more reasonable, then my standards of conviction would then change. You understand what I'm saying?
But you know, isn't it, Justin? I was going to say, Justin, you know that, isn't it? We had the discussion about causality. I think even on your show, I had this discussion about how it's presupposed within a scientific method. So, you know, we accept this particular idea, even though we haven't got empirical evidence for it, you know, because it makes sense of the universe around us. So I'm saying is that on the same basis, we can make sense of the universe around us by referring to a necessary being. Yeah, and you what it my personal opinion on this, Justin, is that I think that it's almost like a psychological thing. You want to like sort of that light bulb moment, you know, where, you know, the Holy Spirit, no, the God,
the clouds open up,
manifest,
and the light shines,
you know,
in
your heart, type of thing, yeah, in a very spiritual way. And in the way I've always looked at it, is it's not really about the emotional impact of the feeling per se. It's about the sincerity of the idea. Do I agree upon this idea, irrespective of my emotions? Yeah, and I know emotion sounds like I'm saying, oh, you're just being emotional. I'm not saying that, because obviously for you, it's like, you know, there's something that's holding you back. And I'm saying that just stripping everything away, just on the basis of the idea and being consistent on the idea, can we conclude that there is a necessary being? You mentioned you want empirical facts or empirical evidence for the premises, as Abdurrahman mentioned. Well, the premises are built. You know, if you want to say every contingent being requires a cause or an explanation, that's what we sense of the reality. Or if you want to say everything that begins to exist has a cause, the universe begins to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. That's all empirical. The empiricism of science proves that point at the moment, at this moment in time. The rest of the discussion is just a logical entailment of that. Like, for example, all men are mortal, John is a man, therefore John is mortal. That's just a logical entailment of what we can sense around us. So I'm just saying, it's just based on that idea. Yeah, forget about whether I'm getting a light bulb moment or not. Can I be convinced on that idea?
I mean, to add to that, because I like using this example, like human chimp common ancestry, right? You believe in it clearly as an atheist. I think you do. What it does is basically it makes an inference from the observable data to the unobservable inference, which is human chimp common ancestry. We don't have direct observable evidence of it, but what it does is that it kind of interprets the evidence in the most coherent way possible to make that inference from the observable to the unobservable. And now I'm not trying to put science at the same epistemic level of these logical and rational discussions we're having here. We could discuss that, we could discuss epistemology, but what I'm saying is the idea is exactly the same, in the sense that you make an inference from the observable or the empirical to the unobservable, and people do that all the time.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I agree with everything you guys are saying. It's something that if you would understand is for right now, within my understanding, is out of my control. My conviction is completely out of my control on what I'm convinced of. I'm basically an observer sitting back, listening to everything that everybody's saying, and whatever clicks, and whatever doesn't.
Well, so, Justin, we don't want to go down that route of the reliability of rational faculties, because we really had that discussion ad nauseum. But the thing is, do you want your beliefs to be rational? I don't want to use the word "want" because I mean you misunderstood me there before. But in a sense, are your beliefs supposed to be rational?
Should they be rational?
Yeah.
Should they? I would agree that they should be rational. Yeah.
Max Payne made an interesting comment on this as well. So he said, well, see, Abdullah Ali al-Andalusi made the same point. Philosophical arguments hardly affects an overall change. I still think the innate predisposition to God and studying Islam, especially the Surah, is probably the biggest motivating. And as well, obviously, coming from a non-Muslim background, and I don't know to what degree Jake can relate to this as well. But sometimes I feel like one of the biggest obstacle for like white Westerners is just this feeling of like what it might be like to identify as Muslim, and maybe there's a sort of fear of how you might be perceived by your community, or the level of commitment that's involved with it. For example, having to pray 5 times a day, fasting, and things like that. Maybe fears of how this might affect relationships with people that are close to you. So I hear children running in the background, so I'm guessing you've got a wife and kids. And
yeah, quite a few.
So do you think that any of this might be making an obstacle for your accepting Islam? Or like, for example, you've gone through a few of these rational arguments and you seem convinced of the idea, like, although you identify as an atheist, your show is called the Empathetic Atheist. I'm guessing like you have a huge, especially when dealing with Christians, you may talk to them about how, you need to be rational. This thing doesn't make sense. That thing doesn't make sense. And so like you're kind of applying this to the Christian, but then when we're trying to apply this to you, there's a sort of disconjunct where you're rationally convinced of arguments, but there's this unseen force that's sort of getting in the way of that. So have you thought about how it may be other things, not necessarily rational, but more just sociological, that may be getting in the way of that?
I wouldn't say it really has anything to do with Islam. Actually, it would be the exact opposite, because for some reason, like when you're a kid and you're getting ready for the next school year, and you just got this feeling like these are going to be the popular shoes. Like I need to go pick myself a pair of Air Force Ones because those are going to be what's popular this year in school. And that's that's what you want to go do. I actually have this innate desire to become a Muslim. I want to.
Take your shahada.
That's
Just raise your hand, Justin, and repeat after me.
Here's the thing. I am not ready to submit. My intentionality is not there, and from the research and studying that I've done into Islam, you have to be ready to fully submit, give your entire ego up. To the intentionality is literally everything when it comes to Islam. So even though it's appealing to me, and reciting the Quran is like the most beautiful language I've ever heard in my life, and all this stuff, it's appealing to my emotions, but on a logical basis, I can't let my emotions get involved.
Yeah, but what Yusuf was saying earlier is what you're saying is that logically the argument makes sense. Belief in one God makes sense, yeah, the necessary being. Mm-hmm. So that's the aspect. And then obviously, we do have an emotional aspect to us as well. So that's part of makes us a human being, this desire to want to do actions and feel emotions and things like that. And so what you've got in essence with Islam is a synergy between a rational conception of the creator that satisfies this innate desire within a human being that wants to sanctify, wants to see things that are greater in purpose and meaning than just being material that's rolling down the hill, through a deterministic pattern. Yeah, so I'm just saying there's a synergy with regards to this. Obviously, I don't think we've really gone into a major discussion about the evidences for the Quran and why we believe that the Quran is the word of the creator and things like that. I think maybe that's a discussion that needs to be had. But I think it's just something to think about, and yeah,
there's no rush obviously in terms of that, but the thing I would like you to think about as well is one thing people sometimes do is they sort of assume that in order to become a Muslim they have to be ready to go full super Muzzy.
Yeah.
And I really think there's a brother called Hamza. He has a really good point in this, that sometimes it's what we believe is that basically the shaitan whispers to you, and he tries everything he can to prevent you from accepting what we believe is true. And he does this by really kind of setting the standard so high, so that if you ever like kind of get yourself to a point where you might think you would submit, that it would have to be on the basis that you like can read Arabic, you already know how to pray, and so on and so forth. Now, I would say be careful of that kind of thinking, because it's not the case. Like half of the time, most of that you learn once you've taken the Shahada, and it's the Shahada that really helps motivate that process of learning. And that's not to say you should like, you know, I'm trying to get you to take it today, right now. Although that would be absolutely amazing for the #1 podcast
for the channel views.
Yeah.
But
I mean, Justin, I've told you in the past, dude, all you really need to do is just change one word in your YouTube channel. Just make it the empathetic Muslim, and you're good to go, man. It's an easy transition.
You've got the son of beard.
I'm not scared to do that. I'm not scared to do that at all. I'm fully ready to, you know, to take that title and change it. Now, I'm almost to 1,000 subscribers there now. I'd probably lose most of those subscribers. Well,
but look how much more you gain, man. I mean,
I know, but we want to be careful here, like mentioning this. That might
Intention.
But
I just want to follow up on what Brother Yusuf was saying, because he was talking from a more spiritual angle, like about the rituals that you have to do, or whatever practices you have to engage in when you become a Muslim, that commitment. But also from an epistemological perspective, the same might be true if you're a fallibilist of knowledge, in the sense that you don't have to be 100% certain about what you know. Then you can really take that leap, as long as you know the evidence you have is sufficient. And I think you kind of need to like draw the line where you want to set that bar for something on a fallibilist basis, because almost everything we know is uncertain in that strict, deep philosophical understanding of what like certainty is. We don't have that kind of certainty that we have with the Coito, I think, therefore I am, with most of what we know. So even from an epistemological perspective, you don't have to attain that 100% certainty in order to take a leap and say that, okay, it is reasonable to say that this proposition is true.
Yeah. And the same goes for like when you became an atheist. Did you have to get yourself to that like 100% level in terms of knowledge base and this, that, and the other before you started identifying?
I'm still not there.
So yeah, exactly. So like you weren't 100% in the realm of the atheist. You weren't 100% in terms of your absolute knowledge base. You're not completely convinced there isn't a God, yet you're willing to identify as one. And
here's
so
my thing. If any atheist would say that they have 100% knowledge of their claims, my next question to them is, why are you even having conversations with people? Like, why are you even talking to them? Because I mean, my purpose of talking to you guys is not to just show you guys how you're wrong. Like, I don't care about winning or losing a debate. I really don't care about any of that. It's about gaining knowledge, learning something from somebody. You know, Bill Nye has a quote, says, every person you meet knows something that you don't. So my purpose is to get out and have conversations with people, most of the time that disagree with me, because that's where you learn the most. You get into an echo chamber and you guys just are sitting around like a bunch of pelicans, like mine, and you just speak the same gibberish to each other that you hear on a daily basis. And that's why I got away from the Christian church, because, you know, on the pulpit you just hear the same crap every single Sunday. So I like getting out and speaking to people that have disagreements with me, so maybe I can figure out where I'm wrong and where I can be right.
Right.
Yeah. And like I said to Elmo, it'd be great to maybe get you on here where we can spend like a decent amount of time with you without having to worry about other people coming on.
Sure.
But if you're up for that, we'll have a little chat, maybe set up a little.
I'm just waiting for Jake to tell me that I don't know anything.
You know,
well, I
nothing.
tell you that all the time, dude. But yeah, Justin, it's just a pleasure talking to you. I'm sure we'll talk again on the show sometime in the future, God willing. But yeah, we should probably move on to the next person, just because
That's fine.
It's the first show, and we want to get, you know, at least a few people in here. But
I appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
Hello. We've got a special guest. How you doing? Can you hear us? Or is it just headphones? Oh, dude.
He can't. I got my headphones in.
Yeah, no, I was guessing that. Maybe if he presses his head against your ear. You all right, little man? Can you hear us?
All right. Well, thank you guys for having me on. I appreciate you. Bringing me on the show.
It's been a pleasure. Justin.
If anybody in the chat, if you guys are interested, in having a conversation, I would like more Muslims to come and have a conversation on my show, because it's typically just cookie cutter Christians all the time, and I'd like a different scenery. A different perspective.
The problem is that whenever you live stream, it's always at stupid o'clock in the morning for us Brits.
Oh yeah.
And like I'm just about to go to bed, and then I'll notice you're live streaming, and I'll jump on, mention something about someone's beard, and it's like, no, I've got to go pass out.
I just remembered, because you mentioned Christians again before you leave, because you said something in the beginning, and I want to be fair to Christians, because you said something about the approach Christians have to their religion and to proving that their religion is true, and that it's just circular. The Bible says it's true, therefore it's true. I think that's the Christians you've been exposed to, because there are a lot of amazing Christian philosophers out there, and there are a lot of Christians who have a more like evidentialist approach to proving that their religion is true. And there are a lot of Christians who actually argue for the truth of their religion. So I just don't want that to be like a sweeping generalization.
Yeah. I don't mean to generalize at all. I've spoken with a lot of Christians that actually make some pretty good arguments, but basically what I was getting at is when speaking with an atheists, that's typically what I get. Now, the issue that I have, and I'll say this real quick before I leave, is that when it comes to Muslims talking to Christians and Christians talking to Muslims, normally I hear, Jake going on about the incarnation, the atonement, the Trinity, things like that. And then when Christians want to fire back about Islam, they say, well, let's talk crap about Prophet Muhammad. Let's talk about the splitting the moon in half. Let's talk about the, I think I've brought up the toothbrush incident with you guys before. Like, they bring up these stupid little quirky things about, about what they think is a defeater for Islam.
It's always secondary.
I kind of agree with that. So I think that like Christian philosophers in general, as far as like when they talk about like philosophy and metaphysics, they're amazing. Also, when they're trying to make a positive case for their religion, they have a lot to say. But when it comes to interfaith dialogue with Muslims, I think that's where the curve goes a bit down.
Yeah. I think what you're trying to say, Justin, is that we have like contentions to the creedal matters, the very basis of Christianity, whereas when some Christians criticize Muslims and Islam, they're talking about very branch aspects, things which are not necessary in origin to what makes a Muslim a Muslim.
Yeah, it's the difference between discussing the foundational things, like like talking about that which underpins the whole theology, and then talking about secondary issues, which are all like the truth or falsity of them rely on the foundational things that they're just skipping over in order to kind of make these sort of pot shots and low blows, low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, I understand. All right, well, I don't want to take up any more of your guys' time. You guys got more guests.
All right, bro. All right, you take care, and we'll speak to you again.